Dr. Sarah Chen had always been drawn to water. Even on this distant alien world called Kythera, she found herself walking along the rushing river that cut through the research station's territory. The double suns cast strange purple shadows across the landscape, and the air smelled like copper and pine. Sarah worked as a xenobiologist for the Terran Research Council. For the past 6 months, she had been studying the planet's unique ecosystem. Kythera was home to creatures that seemed impossible, plants that could think, insects that sang in perfect harmony, and predators that hunted in mathematical patterns. But today felt different. The wind carried an unusual sound, a high-pitched whining that didn't match any of the local wildlife she had cataloged. Sarah stopped walking and listened carefully. The sound came again, desperate and afraid. She followed the noise upstream, her boots crunching on the crystalline sand that lined the riverbank. The whining grew louder as she rounded a bend where the river formed a deep pool. There, in the middle of the swirling water, something small and dark was struggling against the current. Sarah's training kicked in immediately. She had spent years studying alien life forms, and she could tell this was a young creature in serious trouble. The thing in the water looked like a wolf pup, but its fur shimmered with an almost metallic quality. 6 legs flailed desperately as it fought to keep its head above water. Without thinking, Sarah kicked off her boots and dove into the river. The water was shockingly cold, even through her thermal suit. The current was stronger than it looked from the shore, and Sarah had to fight to reach the drowning creature. As she got closer, she could see more details that confirmed this was definitely not from Earth. The pup was about the size of a German shepherd puppy, but its ears were longer and more pointed. Its eyes were a brilliant gold color, and when it saw Sarah approaching, they went wide with terror. The creature had never seen a human before. "Easy there, little one," Sarah said softly, though she knew the creature couldn't understand her words. She hoped her tone would be soothing. "I'm here to help." The pup snapped at her when she reached for it, its teeth surprisingly sharp. Sarah didn't blame it for being scared. She was probably the strangest thing it had ever seen. Humans looked nothing like the native species of Kythera. Sarah tried a different approach. Instead of grabbing the pup directly, she positioned herself downstream and let the current carry the small creature toward her. When it bumped into her, she gently wrapped her arms around its wet, trembling body. The pup stopped struggling immediately. It seemed to understand that Sarah was trying to help, not hurt it. Its gold eyes stared up at her with what looked like curiosity mixed with gratitude. Swimming back to shore was harder than Sarah expected. The pup was heavier than it looked, and its wet fur made it slippery to hold. But Sarah was a strong swimmer, and her determination to save the creature gave her extra strength. When they reached the shallow water near the bank, Sarah carried the pup onto dry land. She set it down gently on the warm sand and stepped back to give it space. The creature shook itself off, sending drops of water flying everywhere. Now that they were both safely on land, Sarah could get a better look at her rescue. The pup was even more beautiful than she had realized. Its fur wasn't just metallic-looking. It actually seemed to contain tiny threads of real metal that caught the light. Its 6 legs were perfectly proportioned, and it moved with a grace that suggested intelligence. The pup stared at Sarah for a long moment, tilting its head from side to side as if trying to figure out what she was. Then it did something unexpected. It sat down and made a sound that was almost like a purr. Sarah smiled. "You're welcome, little guy." She was about to turn and head back to the research station when she heard something that made her blood run cold. A deep, rumbling howl echoed across the landscape. It was answered by another howl from a different direction, then another, and another. The pup's ears perked up, and it let out a small yip in response to the howling. Sarah realized with growing alarm that she had just saved a member of what sounded like a very large pack. The howls were getting closer. Sarah's mind raced through everything she knew about Kithara's predators. The research team had identified several dangerous species, but they had been careful to avoid direct contact. The prime directive was clear: observe, but don't interfere with native wildlife. She had just broken that rule in a major way. The first adult appeared through the trees like a shadow come to life. It was massive, easily the size of a small horse, with the same metallic fur as the pup, but in darker shades of silver and black. Its gold eyes locked onto Sarah immediately, and she felt her heart stop. More adults emerged from different directions. Sarah counted 6, then 8, then stopped counting as more kept appearing. They moved with perfect coordination, forming a loose circle around her and the pup. Sarah stood perfectly still. She had studied enough predators to know that sudden movements could trigger an attack. These creatures were clearly the apex predators of their territory, and she was completely helpless. The largest adult, a magnificent creature with silver fur that seemed to glow in the strange sunlight, stepped forward. It was clearly the pack leader. Its eyes studied Sarah with an intelligence that was almost human-like. The pup ran to the pack leader and nuzzled against its leg, making excited chittering sounds. Sarah couldn't understand the vocalizations, but the meaning was clear. The pup was telling its family what had happened. The pack leader listened to the pup's story, then looked back at Sarah. For a terrifying moment, she thought she was about to become alien wolf food. These creatures could probably tear her apart in seconds. Instead, the pack leader did something that would change everything Sarah thought she knew about alien intelligence. It lowered its massive head in what was unmistakably a bow. Sarah blinked, certain she was seeing things wrong. But the gesture was repeated by every member of the pack. One by one, these powerful predators bowed their heads to her. The pack leader stepped closer to Sarah, moving slowly so as not to frighten her. When it was just a few feet away, it extended its neck and gently touched her hand with its nose. The contact was brief and soft, almost like a kiss. Then the leader stepped back and made a sound unlike any of the howls Sarah had heard before. It was melodic and complex, full of different tones and rhythms. The other pack members joined in, creating a harmony that was absolutely beautiful. Sarah realized they were singing to her. The song lasted for several minutes, rising and falling like a symphony. When it ended, the pack leader looked at Sarah one more time, then turned and walked back into the trees. The other adults followed, but not before each one had approached Sarah and touched her hand with their nose. The pup was the last to leave. It looked up at Sarah with its bright gold eyes and made the purring sound again. Then it bounded after its family, disappearing into the alien forest. Sarah stood alone by the river, her mind reeling from what had just happened. She was a scientist, trained to observe and document, but what she had just experienced felt like something beyond science. She had expected gratitude, maybe, or simple acknowledgement that she had helped their young. But this had been something more. The bowing, the song, the ceremonial way each adult had touched her hand. It all suggested a level of intelligence and emotional depth that went far beyond anything in her xenobiology textbooks. As Sarah walked back to the research station, she tried to process what the pack's response might mean. In human culture, bowing was a sign of respect or reverence. The song could have been a form of prayer or blessing, and the touching, that felt like they were marking her somehow, recognizing her as something special. But why? She had simply done what any decent person would do when they saw a creature in danger. It was basic compassion, nothing more. The research station came into view as the suns began to set. Sarah could see the lights in the laboratory windows where her colleagues were probably working late into the night. She needed to report what had happened, but she wasn't sure how to explain it. How do you tell your fellow scientists that you might have just made first contact with a species intelligent enough to hold religious ceremonies? As she reached the station's entrance, Sarah heard something that made her turn around. In the distance, carried on the evening wind, came the sound of singing. The pack was still out there, and their song seemed different now, richer, more complex. Sarah had the strange feeling that her life had just changed forever. She had come to Kythera to study alien life, but it seemed the aliens had decided to study her right back. And tomorrow, she suspected, they would want to learn much more, although Sarah barely slept that night. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw those golden eyes staring at her with impossible intelligence. By dawn, she had made her decision. She had to tell Dr. Williams, the expedition leader, what had happened. She found Dr. Marcus Williams in the main lab, hunched over his morning coffee and a stack of geological surveys. At 62, Williams had seen enough alien worlds to remain skeptical of extraordinary claims. His gray beard twitched as Sarah recounted her encounter by the river. "Let me understand this correctly," Williams said when she finished. "You're telling me these predators performed what you interpreted as a ceremony? Sarah, you've been working too hard. Alien minds don't think like human minds." "I know how it sounds," Sarah replied, pulling up the video footage from her suit's recording system. "But look at this." The holographic display flickered to life, showing the moment the pack leader bowed to her. Williams leaned forward, his coffee forgotten. The footage was clear. There was no mistaking the deliberate nature of the gesture. "My God," Williams whispered, "how many individuals did you count?" "At least 12 adults, probably more in the trees." Sarah enhanced the audio, and the pack's song filled the lab. "Listen to this harmonic structure. It's not random vocalization. There's intentional rhythm and melody." Dr. Elena Vasquez, the team's linguist, entered the lab just as the song reached its crescendo. She stopped dead in her tracks, her dark eyes wide with amazement. "That's not animal communication," Elena said, her voice barely above a whisper. "That's language. Complex, structured language." Williams stood up abruptly, knocking over his coffee cup. "This changes everything. If these creatures are truly intelligent, we need to follow first contact protocols immediately." Sarah shook her head. "It's too late for that. Contact has already been made. The question is what happens next." As if summoned by her words, an alarm chimed throughout the station. The perimeter sensors had detected movement. Sarah, Williams, and Elena rushed to the observation deck, where they could see across the clearing that surrounded their base. The pack was there. They sat in perfect formation at the edge of the forest, just beyond the research station's defensive barriers. The pack leader was in the center, with the others arranged in what looked like a deliberate pattern. The pup sat beside its parent, occasionally looking toward the station with obvious curiosity. "They've been there since before sunrise," reported Dr. James Chen, the team's security specialist. "No aggressive behavior. They're just waiting." Sarah's heart raced. "They're waiting for me." "Absolutely not," Williams said firmly. "We don't know their intentions. For all we know, this could be hunting behavior." "They could have killed me yesterday if they wanted to," Sarah pointed out. "Instead, they thanked me." Elena was studying the pack through high-powered binoculars. "Their positioning isn't random. Look at how they're arranged. It's almost like a mathematical pattern. And see how the leader keeps looking at the main entrance? They know which door Sarah uses." The standoff continued for 3 hours. The pack remained motionless while the research team debated their next move. Finally, Sarah couldn't stand it anymore. "I'm going out there." "That's an order, Dr. Chen," Williams snapped. "You will not—" "With respect, sir, I'm going." Sarah was already suiting up. "They're not going to leave until they get what they came for, and I think what they want is to communicate." Williams looked like he was about to explode, but Elena placed a hand on his arm. "Let her go, Marcus. But we'll monitor everything and be ready to extract her if things go wrong." Sarah walked through the airlock and across the clearing, her heart hammering against her ribs. The pack watched her approach but didn't move. When she was about 50 feet away, the pack leader stood and walked toward her. They met in the middle of the clearing. Up close, the creature was even more magnificent than Sarah remembered. Its metallic fur caught the morning light like liquid mercury, and its gold eyes held a depth of intelligence that was almost overwhelming. The pack leader studied her for a long moment, then did something remarkable. It placed a small object at Sarah's feet. Sarah looked down and gasped. It was a carved stone, roughly the size of her palm, depicting the scene from yesterday. Her diving into the water to save the pup. The carving was incredibly detailed, showing not just the rescue but the emotional weight of the moment. "You made this?" Sarah asked, knowing the creature couldn't understand her words but hoping her tone conveyed her amazement. The pack leader's response was to make the purring sound she had heard from the pup, then point toward the forest with one of its front paws. The message was clear. It wanted her to follow. Sarah looked back at the research station, knowing her colleagues were probably having collective heart attacks. But her scientific curiosity was stronger than her fear. She nodded to the pack leader. The journey into the forest was like stepping into another world. The trees were massive, with trunks that spiraled toward the sky in perfect mathematical curves. Bioluminescent plants provided patches of soft light, and the air hummed with the sounds of invisible creatures. The pack moved through this alien landscape with fluid grace, never losing sight of Sarah but giving her space to observe and wonder. After about an hour of walking, they emerged into a clearing that took Sarah's breath away. It was a village. Structures made from woven branches and crystalline stones dotted the clearing. They weren't crude shelters. They were sophisticated buildings with architectural elements that showed advanced planning and artistic sensibility. Gardens of alien plants grew in carefully maintained patterns between the structures. But most amazing of all were the inhabitants. Dozens of the metallic-furred creatures moved through their settlement, engaged in what could only be called civilization. Some tended to the gardens, while others worked with tools to craft objects from wood and stone. Young pups played games that involved complex problem-solving. They all stopped what they were doing when they saw Sarah. The pack leader led her to the center of the village, where a large circular building dominated the space. Other creatures emerged from their homes and activities, gathering in a respectful circle around Sarah and her guide. An elderly creature approached from the central building. Its fur had turned white with age, and it moved with the careful dignity of great authority. This was clearly a leader of some kind, perhaps a chief or elder. The elderly creature examined Sarah with eyes that seemed to see straight through to her soul. Then it began to speak. The language was unlike anything Sarah had ever heard. It flowed like music, full of tonal variations and harmonic overtones. But what struck her most was that it sounded purposeful and structured. This wasn't just sophisticated animal communication, it was true language. Elena would have been beside herself with excitement. When the elder finished speaking, the pack leader responded in the same musical language. Sarah caught what sounded like her name repeated several times, along with gestures toward her and the river. Then the elder did something that nearly brought Sarah to her tears. It approached her and gently took her hands in its paws. The touch was warm and careful, mindful of the difference in their anatomy. The elder looked into Sarah's eyes and spoke a single word that somehow, impossibly, Sarah understood. Friend. The word hadn't been spoken in English. It had been communicated in their language. But the meaning had been so clear, so unmistakable, that Sarah had no doubt about its translation. The village erupted in celebration. The creatures began singing together, their voices creating harmonies that seemed to make the air itself vibrate with joy. Some brought gifts, more carved stones, woven fabrics that shimmered like starlight, and flowers that glowed with their own inner light. Sarah was overwhelmed. She had expected to spend her time on Kythera, cataloging plants and simple animal behaviors. Instead, she had stumbled into first contact with an intelligent species that appeared to have their own art, architecture, language, and complex social structures. As the celebration continued around her, Sarah noticed something that made her scientist's heart race with excitement. In the central building, through an open doorway, she could see what looked like star charts carved into the walls. Mathematical equations were etched alongside the astronomical observations. These creatures weren't just intelligent, they were scientists. The pack leader noticed her interest and gestured toward the building. The elder nodded approvingly, and Sarah found herself being invited inside what was clearly some kind of observatory or research center. The interior walls were covered with carved diagrams that showed sophisticated understanding of mathematics, astronomy, and physics. Some of the equations were familiar to Sarah, while others used symbols and concepts she didn't recognize but could tell were highly advanced. In one corner, she saw something that made her stop in amazement. It was a detailed map of the local star system, complete with accurate representations of planetary orbits and what looked like notations about space travel. They knew about other worlds. They might even have the technology to reach them. The elder noticed Sarah's reaction and pointed to specific markings on the star map. Then it pointed upward, toward the sky, and made a gesture that Sarah interpreted as flying or traveling. "You've been to space?" Sarah asked, knowing they wouldn't understand her words, but hoping her excitement was clear. The response was a musical phrase that sounded proud and wistful at the same time. The elder gestured to more carvings that showed what looked like spacecraft designs. But there was something sad about the way it touched these particular images. Sarah began to understand. These creatures had once been spacefaring, but something had happened. They were stranded on their own world, cut off from the stars they clearly loved and missed. As the day progressed, Sarah learned more about their remarkable society. They had developed agriculture, medicine, and engineering. Their young were educated in schools where they learned not just practical skills, but art and philosophy. They had laws and governance structures that seemed to prioritize the welfare of the community while respecting individual contributions. Most importantly, they had maintained hope. Even stranded on their world, they continued to study the stars and work on solutions to their isolation. When evening came, the pack leader escorted Sarah back toward the research station. The journey was quieter this time, both of them lost in thought about the implications of what had been shared. At the edge of the forest, the pack leader stopped and looked at Sarah intently. It spoke a few words in its musical language, then pointed toward the village and then toward Sarah herself. The meaning was clear. She was welcome to return any time. As Sarah walked back across the clearing to the research station, she knew that everything had changed. First contact protocols, scientific observation, her entire understanding of what it meant to encounter alien intelligence. All of it had been transformed by a simple act of compassion beside a river. The research team was waiting for her with 1,000 questions, but Sarah barely heard them. Her mind was already racing ahead to tomorrow, when she would return to the village with Elena to begin the real work of building communication between two intelligent species. What had started as saving a drowning pup had become the foundation for what might be the most important relationship in human history. 3 weeks after Sarah's first visit to the village, Dr. Elena Vasquez had made a breakthrough that would change everything. Working with recordings of the pack's musical language, she had developed a basic translation program that could convert simple concepts between human speech and the aliens' tonal communication. The first successful conversation happened on a crisp morning as autumn began to paint the alien forest in shades of silver and gold. Sarah sat across from the elder, called Harmony of Stars in the closest human translation, while Elena operated the translation device. "We have waited 300 years for someone like you," Harmony of Stars said through the device. Its musical voice converted to synthesized English. Someone who would risk themselves for a stranger's child. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. 300 years? What do you mean? The elder's golden eyes grew distant with memory. Long ago, our people traveled between worlds. We explored the galaxy, seeking knowledge and friendship with other intelligent species. But we found only silence and emptiness, until we discovered the signals. Elena adjusted the translation parameters as Harmony of Stars continued. Radio waves from a distant blue world, voices speaking of love, sacrifice, art, and hope. We learned your languages, studied your culture, watched your species grow from afar. You've been monitoring Earth? Sarah's scientific mind raced with the implications. For centuries, we saw your wars and your peace, your cruelty and your compassion. We debated among ourselves whether humans were ready for contact. Some believed you were too violent. Others argued you were too young as a species. The elder stood and walked to a wall covered in star charts. Then came the great failure. Our starships broke down one by one, victims of a cosmic storm that damaged our technology. We became stranded here, cut off from the galaxy we had explored for millennia. Sarah began to understand the sadness she had sensed in their space-faring artifacts. You've been trapped here for 300 years? Trapped and diminished. Without access to certain rare materials, we could not repair our ships or build new ones. We could only watch the stars and remember what we had lost. Harmony of Stars touched one of the star maps with evident longing. But we continued to monitor your world, hoping that someday humans might develop the technology to reach us. Elena looked up from her translation device. Sarah, they've been waiting for us, specifically waiting for humans. But why? Sarah asked. Harmony of Stars returned to sit across from them. Because in all our travels, in all our observation of distant worlds, we never found a species quite like yours. You are the only people we've encountered who consistently risk their own safety to help creatures they don't even know. The elder gestured toward the forest where Sarah had saved the pup. Most intelligent species develop logic and self-preservation as their primary drives. They help their own kind, sometimes their allies, but rarely strangers. Humans are different. You have something we called the reaching heart, the ability to extend compassion beyond the boundaries of kinship or mutual benefit. Sarah felt tears welling up in her eyes. You mean what I did by the river? What you did was not unique to you personally, Sarah Chen. It was uniquely human. We have observed thousands of instances of humans risking themselves for other species, rescuing animals from disasters, protecting endangered creatures, caring for beings that could never repay them. Harmony of Stars leaned forward, its voice growing more intense. This quality is so rare in the galaxy that we began to believe it might be the key to something much larger than simple survival. Elena was frantically taking notes. What kind of key? The elder was quiet for a long moment, as if deciding whether to share something profound. Finally, it spoke again. We believe that species with the reaching heart might be the only ones capable of true galactic civilization, not conquest or competition, but actual cooperation between worlds. Over the following days, Harmony of Stars shared more of their history and their dreams. The Pack's people, who called themselves the Seekers of Distant Songs, had spent generations developing technologies that could bridge differences between species, universal translators, adaptive life support systems, and most importantly, philosophical frameworks for cooperation. But they had never found another species willing to use these tools for anything beyond military advantage or economic exploitation. Every civilization they encountered ultimately viewed other species as either resources to be used or threats to be eliminated. Until we watched your world, the elder explained during one of their daily conversations. We saw humans sacrifice themselves to protect whales, nurse wounded birds back to health, and establish laws to protect creatures that had no voice in your politics. We realized that humans might be the missing element we had been searching for. Dr. Williams had initially been skeptical of these claims, but as more evidence accumulated, even he had to admit that they were dealing with something extraordinary. The Seekers had technology that was centuries ahead of human science, but they had been unable to use it effectively because it required the cooperation of species who genuinely cared about each other's welfare. The breakthrough came when Harmony of Stars showed them the harmonic engine. Deep beneath the village, in caverns that had been carved with mathematical precision, lay a machine that defied human understanding. It was part spacecraft engine, part musical instrument, and part computer. Crystalline components hummed with energy patterns that formed complex harmonies. "This engine does not simply travel through space," the elder explained as they stood before the magnificent device. "It creates bridges between worlds, allowing instant communication and travel across vast distances, but it only functions when operated by beings who can work together in perfect harmony." Elena stared at the machine in wonder. "You mean it literally requires harmony, like music?" "Like music, like cooperation, like the willingness to risk oneself for others." Harmony of Stars placed a paw on the crystalline control surface, and the engine responded with a chord so beautiful it brought tears to Sarah's eyes. "We built this technology hoping to connect the galaxy's intelligent species in bonds of mutual understanding. Instead, we discovered that most species cannot achieve the emotional synchronization required to make it work." Sarah suddenly understood. "But humans can." "We believe so. Your species has the reaching heart we have been looking for. If we work together, we might be able to repair our connection to the galaxy and begin the great work we abandoned centuries ago." The next few weeks became a frenzy of activity as both species worked to understand each other's capabilities. The humans shared their knowledge of materials, science, and engineering, while the Seekers taught principles of physics that human science had barely begun to imagine. Sarah found herself at the center of it all, not because of her scientific expertise, but because she had become the symbol of the partnership. The Seekers called her first among bridge builders, a title that carried enormous respect in their culture. But it was the pup she had rescued who provided the key insight that changed everything. The young Seeker, now named River Song in honor of its rescue, had been spending time with the human research team. Its natural curiosity and lack of fear around humans made it an excellent translator of concepts that the adults sometimes struggled to communicate. One day, while watching Sarah work on a computer, Riversong made an observation that stunned everyone present. "Human Sarah," it said through Elena's translation device, "your thinking patterns and our thinking patterns make beautiful music together." Elena looked up from her instruments. "What do you mean, Riversong?" The young Seeker pointed at the computer screen where Sarah was analyzing data. "Watch the numbers. When human Sarah thinks about problems, her mind makes patterns that fit perfectly with Seeker patterns, like voices singing harmony." Elena ran a quick scan of Sarah's brainwaves while she worked, then compared them to neural activity patterns they had recorded from the Seekers. What she found was impossible, but undeniable. Human brainwaves and Seeker brainwaves, when both species were engaged in cooperative problem-solving, synchronized into complementary patterns. They were literally thinking in harmony. "This is why the harmonic engine responds to you," Harmony of Stars said when they shared the discovery. "Your species and ours may be the first two intelligent species in the galaxy whose minds naturally complement each other." The implications were staggering. Working together, humans and Seekers could operate technology that neither could manage alone. They could explore the galaxy not as competitors, but as partners, each species contributing unique strengths to their joint endeavors. But first, they needed to repair the harmonic engine. The project took 3 months and required the combined efforts of both species. Humans provided materials and engineering techniques that the Seekers had been unable to develop in isolation. The Seekers contributed theoretical knowledge and harmonic principles that allowed the technology to function. When the engine was finally ready for its first test, representatives from both species gathered in the underground chamber. Sarah stood beside Harmony of Stars at the control console, their hands and paws working together to operate the crystalline interface. The machine came to life with a sound that was beyond music. It was as if the universe itself was singing, harmonies building upon harmonies until the very air seemed to vibrate with joy. Through the harmonic engine's connection, they reached out across space and time to touch other worlds, and for the first time in 300 years, the Seekers heard responses. Distant voices from across the galaxy answered their call. Some were curious, others cautious, but all were amazed to hear from the legendary Seekers who had vanished centuries ago. The news that they had found partners among a young species called humans sent ripples of excitement through civilizations that had long ago given up hope of meaningful contact with other intelligent life. As Sarah listened to the first interstellar conversations between humans and aliens, she realized that her simple act of saving a drowning pup had led to something beyond her wildest dreams. She had not just rescued a single creature. She had rescued the dreams of an entire species and opened the door to humanity's future among the stars. Harmony of Stars looked at her with those wise golden eyes and spoke words that would be remembered throughout human history. Sarah Chen, you saved our child from drowning. In return, we offer to save your species from loneliness. Together, we will teach the galaxy to sing. Standing in that chamber, listening to the voices of a dozen different species joining in harmonious conversation across the vast distances between worlds, Sarah finally understood what it truly meant to be human. It wasn't their technology or their intelligence that made humans special. It was their willingness to dive into dangerous waters to save a stranger's child, expecting nothing in return except the knowledge that they had done the right thing. And that simple, beautiful impulse had just changed the course of galactic history forever, and it was only the beginning. The strange creature who had risked her own life to save one of their young.